Some from Nintendo only agreed to do a relatively small amount of interviews for Blake Harris's book and documentary covering the console wars between Sega and Nintendo. It's also worth noting that the Nintendo people Harris did interview were mostly former employees, like Howard Phillips, who had left years prior. The active corporate leadership and the key figures like Arakawa maintained the wall of silence. The documentary is free on YouTube. It was really good and entertaining. Like with Chef, Nintendo likely wanted to get their side of the story out, seeing as how Blake's book was going to be highly publicized. Seth Rogen wrote the foreword, and CBS and Paramount made the documentary. In a New Republic interview, Harris says he wanted to tell Nintendo's story as much as Sega's, but Nintendo, quote, wasn't very responsive, unquote, and he wasn't always able to tell the other side of the story. Tom Kalinske, the former Sega of America CEO, gave Harris boxes of documents and hours of time. Nintendo gave him almost nothing. The result? A book where Sega looks like a scrappy band of rebels and Nintendo looks like a faceless, monolithic empire. Ironically, Nintendo's silence hurt their own portrayal in that specific book. In a later interview, Harris is even more explicit that the early telling skewed Sega side because Nintendo was tight-lipped and access was hard, so for a big chunk of his research, he was hearing it mainly from Sega people. In a Nintendo Life interview, Harris says that Minoru Arakawa, the founder and former president of Nintendo of America, declined to speak with him, and he describes dealing with Nintendo of America as frustrating, saying he wishes they'd be more supportive. Sony, like Sega, also demonstrates far more openness compared to Nintendo. Sony gave unprecedented access to their archives for the PlayStation 30th anniversary book, including R&D prototypes and development models. The Ken Kutaragi biography was explicitly authorized by Sony, and a separate PlayStation anthology was produced with Sony's cooperation. Teacher and writer John Irwin had a similar experience to the others when working on his Super Mario Bros. 2 book, and even references Jeff Ryan. Irwin writes, Michael Kelbaugh, then president and CEO of Retro Studios, told Chris Kohler in 2011 that Tanabe is very patient, even at times when he doesn't need to be, and is sincere about teaching Americans, Westerners, the Nintendo philosophy. Just what is that philosophy, then? One tenet, apparently, is don't give interviews about your philosophy. Repeated requests to Nintendo's PR firm, Golan Harris, went unanswered as I tried to communicate directly with Tanabe. This was no isolated evasion. Nintendo rarely gives access to journalists writing about their company beyond the standard game review. Jeff Ryan, in the Acknowledgments of Super Mario, How Nintendo Conquered America, echoes the lack of access given to him after he explained his project to be a full-scale history of the company. Nintendo is a particular company, he writes, and one of those particularities is not cooperating with the press when it comes to books. Elsewhere, Irwin writes, after a year of research, playing, writing, and rewriting, there is still so much about Super Mario Bros. 2 I don't know. Nintendo keeps a tight lock on the doors. Many documents and records remain inaccessible. Wired's Chris Kohler earned a BA in Japanese from Tufts University, graduating summa cum laude in 2002, with his thesis on the cinematic Japanese video game, receiving highest honors, linking his Japanese studies to his career in video game journalism, where he later received a Fulbright scholarship to research in Japan for his book Power Up. He writes, every new generation of elementary school children creates a new and specialized vocabulary with which they can communicate with their peers and confound their parents. For the Nintendo generation, many of these words came straight from the pen of Gail Tilden. Tilden joined Nintendo of America in 1983 as the entire advertising department. Tilden was single-handedly responsible for advertising, public relations, marketing, and for naming all the products and games, the entire product line. With that in mind, consider what Irwin writes. While speaking with Gail Tilden, I asked if she knew of any current employees whom she thought might be willing to speak with me. I think you have almost no chance, she said, laughing. Nintendo does not like to participate in these types of projects because they don't know, ultimately, how history will be written, she said, adding, or rewritten. History, as they say, is written by the winners. A company that makes video games creates objects of play to be won by their players. In one sense, Nintendo is the ultimate control freak. Planner, architect, landlord, all in one. But who runs through these rooms? Who leaps across the chasm, jumps over obstacles, each carefully laid out for the residents' frustration and amusement? We do. We win the game. Perhaps ownership of the past is not as simple as the maxim suggests. As storytellers have known for eons, the teller herself does not always own her tale. So, this is a significant admission from Nintendo's chief marketer during their rise to fame. Nintendo's preferred alternative to these private biographies that people try to write has been to publish their own resources on the history of Nintendo. Nintendo's own Iwata Asks site describes it as interviews conducted by Nintendo's president, Satoru Iwata, with the creators behind Nintendo games and hardware. That's first-party, in-house, fully curated by definition. These interviews were even compiled into a book called Ask Iwata. The publisher description explicitly says it's drawn from the Iwata Asks series. It's a curated compilation of Nintendo's own in-house interviews. Iwata is even quoted as saying, "I've always wondered why most interviews lead with the hardest questions. Why can't they lead with the easiest questions?" This is why they like writing their own books. They don't want the hard questions from the journalists trying to write their books. Perrin Kaplan is the former vice president of marketing and corporate affairs for Nintendo of America. Her bio summaries note that she worked on Washington State Senate communications staff and later oversaw government affairs functions at Nintendo of America. In the first episode of the Prime Video documentary series on Nintendo, called Playing with Power, The Nintendo Story, she says, "You know, I've been asked 1,000,000 times to do these things, that is, participate in a Nintendo documentary, and you're the second person I was willing to do it with." Well, it's just, Nintendo has lots of secret ways we do things. Yes. Randy Nichols is a department chair and professor at University of Washington, Tacoma. He holds a PhD in communication and society from the University of Oregon. He focuses on the political economy of the video game industry. In his book, Nintendo, Playing with Power, published by Routledge in 2024, he writes, "Nintendo's strategies and inner dealings have largely been a mystery. This project aims to pull back that veil to look at how the company has used its power to maintain its success." Keza McDonald is the first Western journalist in decades, since David Sheff, to enter their sanctuary and be granted this level of biographer access for a major book from a traditional publisher. The publisher page for Super Nintendo, the game-changing company that unlocked the power of play, says the book is based on, quote, private interviews with industry icons like Shigeru Miyamoto, unquote, and describes a trip to Nintendo's secretive headquarters in Kyoto, adding she is one of few Western journalists to have set foot inside the building. The book was just released earlier this year. She acknowledges in the book that Nintendo is an extremely secretive company. In her Guardian interview with Miyamoto, she literally describes being at Nintendo's Kyoto HQ, being told there's no tour upstairs, and meeting him in a featureless meeting room with multiple PR staff present. She writes, "Perhaps it's more interesting looking upstairs, but that's a mystery to anyone who doesn't work here. As I am firmly but politely told when I ask if there's any chance of a tour, nobody goes up there." In the past decade or so, he's pulled back from the spotlight, Miyamoto that is. He doesn't often do interviews, and our meeting today has taken more than a year to arrange. Wearing a Mario t-shirt under a black blazer, he meets me in a featureless meeting room at Nintendo's Kyoto HQ, flanked by no fewer than 3 Nintendo PR people from different regions, most of whom seem rather stunned to be near him. So, even when access is granted, it's bounded, supervised, and tightly shaped. I think her visit, though, is a positive sign. Nintendo's incentives have changed over the years. It's plausible that Miyamoto has been set free in his old age. He's fulfilling his dream of competing with Disney as Nintendo grows in fame with theme parks and movies. In the past, perhaps Hiroshi Yamauchi imposed stricter controls. He was known for being a recluse and not being fond of the media. So it's possible now that he's gone and other leaders are gone, that Miyamoto feels a little more free and feels the need to explain himself to the press as he's coming out with all these movies and theme parks. He probably wants a good Western biography that's fair. McDonald writes, "In the past 10 years or so, he has been more involved with Nintendo's efforts outside video games, from Universal Studios' Super Nintendo World theme parks to Illumination's Super Mario Bros. Movie, which was a huge hit this year. These days, I don't think of myself as a game designer," he explains. "I'm about finding unique opportunities for Nintendo. The way things work here is that, more so than having a plan and following it, we come across certain things, and from there, we try to find our own new path. The movies, the amusement parks, I'm excited to see what kind of organic things result from those. I'm still very new to the movie industry, and I'm still learning, but I'm trying to read a lot of scripts these days and learn about how they are developed to see how we can create uniquely Nintendo films."